once the season starts, it is all and only about 49ers winning and losing. That is all that matters. Am I interested to see if Brock Purdy is a little better than last year, is a little worse than last year, is the same? Yes, of course. But they've got to, it's all about winning the games any way they can. And to me, that's where, once these games start, the quarterback is almost, for me, going to be another position on the field. We're going to talk about Brock Purdy. We're going to talk about Ayuk. We're going to talk about Bosa. We're going to talk about Trent Williams. But it's not, I don't think there's going to be a reason for it to dominate the conversation. I'm not going to want to talk about it if there's not a lot to talk about outside of the way you usually talk about a quarterback in a city that's talking about their football team.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, look, how did they perform? And that's secondary to, did they win the game? Like, I do think we will be talking about the quarterback if and when the 49ers lose a game, which is why I think it's important to get out to a fast start, not just so that, of course, you stack wins and you keep pace with Philadelphia, because you got to have your eye on the 1 seed. You got to have your eye on home field advantage throughout the postseason, because I think the 49ers can beat Philadelphia here in Santa Clara. I'm not so sure they can beat them in Philadelphia. I think they have a chance, and they were a 2-point underdog last year going into that football game, but it's significantly more difficult. And the reason why I brought up the college football example in the first segment is because, for example, last year, there were 6 college football teams with 2 losses.
Okay.
Only one of them got into the Final Four. Only one of them got a chance to compete for a national championship. So if you lose a couple of games, now it's a 17-game season in the NFL, the 49ers are obviously 13-4 wasn't good enough last year. They were the 2 seed. So you are looking at every single game as a must-win. Every single week is so important because you have to, in my opinion, be the 1 seed this year. That should be the goal. The goal should not just be to win the division. That's secondary. Not just to get a home playoff game in the wild card or divisional round. That's secondary. It's be the 1 seed. You have to have home field advantage throughout the entire playoffs. And I think the 49ers understand the importance of that now, because someone like Kyle Juszczyk, Kyle Shanahan, they understand, and their tone is, yes, it is difficult. You have to go throughout an entire season, much like they did last year. You can't just fast forward to the Final Four. But I think they realize how important that is, that they weren't playing at Levi's Stadium last year.
I think it's fair to say that they've put an emphasis on a fast start, or not putting themselves behind the 8 ball 6 games into the season. I think that's something that Juszczyk talked about in a recent interview, and I think it's a fair talking point. When I look at the NFL now and how many games are being played, which is 17, I almost think you got to allow for some stuff. What we got to go 14-3. That's the way. If I were a football player, I'd kind of look at it. Let's get 14 wins. 14 wins would be a really good number. It's a hell of a number. That's a lot. You know what I mean? That's a lot of wins, and that means you're winning most of your close games, and you're not giving away any games. So 14-3, that's kind of what I would be thinking. I wouldn't predict that. If that were the number, I would say, well, I got to take the under. But I think don't you think the Niners are thinking we can win 14 games?
Well, I think Diego and Marin wants to talk about how that might play out because of the schedule of each of those teams. What's up, Diego? You're on Marin, and you're on 95.7 The Game with Steiny and Evan. What do you got? What do you want to get off your chest about the 49ers?
Not so much get off my chest, just an opinion about the season and the team. I think if you look at the schedules of both Niners and Eagles, you could say that when they meet, that the Niners should only have maybe 2 losses at best, maybe 4 at worst, and the Eagles should have at least 4 if you look at the schedule leading up to the Niners game and the game right after against the Cowboys for the second time of the year. The Eagles could effectively be drop to almost 500 if they lose to the Niners that game, and maybe you have to go on the road the entire playoffs. So I'm really not worried about the Eagles.
There you go.
Interesting.
You know what? You know what's going to make this year fun, too? Eagles fans don't really think much of the Niners.
And Niners fans don't think much about the Eagles.
I know. I mean, my buddies from back east who are Eagles fans, they do think we're better than you guys. We have a better team. We have a better overall team. We certainly have a better quarterback. That's the way they think.
I think that's the reason for confidence. But outside of that, I can make a case the Niners got a better running back. They got just as good weapons on the outside. They got a better tight end. Could say they got a better defensive line. They actually stole your guy. Although I know a lot of Eagles fans maybe not too high on Hargrave.
No, they think he's good, but they think the guy...
Jalen Carter, the guy they drafted, can come in and be just as good.
Yeah, they do.
Linebackers probably favor the 49ers. Secondary maybe favors the Eagles. Like I think they're very even outside of maybe the quarterback, which could be the reason you have doubts or confidence, depending on what side you're on. But what the caller was talking about, and I think this is important, Week 13 of the regular season, Sunday, December 3rd, is when the 49ers meet the Philadelphia Eagles in Philly at Lincoln Financial. It's going to be 125, but the point is, what do the Niners need to be going into that game? And from what the caller was laying out about the schedule, I don't know about the Eagles having 4 losses at that point, but if the Niners want to give themselves a chance to jump the Eagles, because that's a point in the season in which you're going to start to look at, all right, who's the 1, who's the 2, who's getting the bye, who's getting home field advantage.
I mean, ideally, that game is a game that, by that point, either the 49ers already have 2 games in hand, or a 49ers win ties with the Eagles or leapfrogs the Eagles and then gives them the tiebreaker in a home field playoff scenario. That would be where I would like to be if I'm the San Francisco 49ers against the Eagles that week. That if we beat them, now we're both, 10-3, but we have the head-to-head. That would be a good spot to be in. Even better spot would be to be up 2 games on them, and if you lose, you're still up a game on them, But, I want to address this on the Xfinity mobile text line. Steiny, so what you're saying is that the 49ers are the only team in the NFL where the quarterback is not as important as the other players. Really, I mean, more. No, what I'm saying is that, although some people would make that case, but what I'm saying is once the regular season starts, I don't think it's going to be about Purdy anymore. We're going to talk about him like every market talks about their quarterback the game after a win or a loss. But the concentration on who played well at practice, is Trey going to get a shot, who's the second string quarterback, Darnold or Trey, I'm sorry, but that doesn't matter anymore after the first week of the season. Like, I don't care how Purdy plays overall. Of course it's going to impact the team. It's about they're 1-0. Now they're 2-0. Now they're 3-0. Now they're 3-1. Now they're 4-1. Now they're 5-1. That's all that matters.
And I want to know if people are with you, Steiny.
Because
are we not going to be talking about the quarterbacks as much as we did? Or are we going to talk about them like we talked about Jimmy Garoppolo? Because Jimmy Garoppolo was a very record-centric quarterback. If you won, Jimmy did good. Or maybe didn't. If you lost...
If Brock Purdy plays exactly like Jimmy Garoppolo, he will take far less criticism than Jimmy Garoppolo because he's a younger player with less experience. The other thing about the Niners, too, is you can't be getting caught up in the numbers game, the individual numbers game, because they're going to fluctuate game to game to game. Ayuk's not going to have 17 great games. McCaffrey's not going to have 17 great games. There's going to be periods where maybe Kittle will have 8 catches in a 3 or 4 game stretch, and he won't be getting his numbers. But in a perfect world, it's not going to matter. That's the other thing that I think is going to happen. Outside Christian McCaffrey, there's going to be variation in the numbers from the other playmakers, but who cares? It's going to be who's utilized best on that given Sunday.
Well, I think people will care if they don't win.
Correct.
If they do not, again, we're all assuming that they get off to a great start, but if they don't, which to be fair, they have not each of the past 2 seasons. In 2021, they started off 3-5. In 2022, they started off 3-4 before they got McCaffrey. If that happens again, and the reason why I think we will be talking about the quarterback is because the noise will get louder about what to do because you don't have a veteran behind center. To your point, you have a younger guy. If Purdy loses, he might get less criticism than Jimmy Garoppolo, but there's going to be more people calling for his job, I believe, because you have either another young quarterback in Trey Lance or you have a more veteran quarterback in Sam Darnold. And that is why we do talk about the backup quarterback position, not because we assume Brock Purdy is going to fail, but if he doesn't play well, if the Niners get off to a slow start, if, God forbid, Brock Purdy has an injury or has a setback with his arm, then that backup quarterback position does become very important. And the text line is chiming in as a 40-year-old Niner fan. I want to get off my chest. I am happy that ownership, as well, in his words, have gotten out of its own way. Brock is our Brady. Get ready for a wild ride. People on YouTube also chiming in. If Purdy isn't playing, fans are going to be calling for Trey. I think that's where a lot of the quarterback conversation is going to go. But again, if they win, Steiny, all of that gets silenced, I think. And it just becomes, all right, it's a 2-horse race. How are you doing on your side of the fence? And are you winning games? Like, every week, if they lose, I don't know, maybe the conversation is more about Kyle Shanahan than the actual quarterbacks.
It's not a bad point. That's not a bad point. And I also think, the one thing about Kyle Shanahan, and this is why I don't think there's going to be an issue at quarterback unless there's an injury, is Kyle has a way of, he'll try to convince the fans that Purdy's playing better than he is if people think Purdy's not playing great. Kyle will support him and say, well, the people that are saying Brock's not on point, I know what's on point. That's why I'm the coach, and he's doing great. To that extent, I do not think, again, that Kyle Shanahan's system doesn't really lend itself to quarterbacks having terrible numbers.